Last week, we talked about a woman by the name of Hannah. Hannah, who is the mother of the prophet Samuel. Tonight, we are going to look at the first prayer we have in the Bible from this boy, eventually turned man, Samuel. And it's truly a remarkable story. And in fact, when I was a little kid, this was my favorite story in the Bible. This was my favorite story. I loved the story. I would ask my parents, I remember having this children's Bible, and I would ask my parents to read this story to me over and over and over and over again. I absolutely love the story. And the truth is, and even though I'm 46 years old, and in a month I'll be 47 years old, this is still one of my favorite stories in the Bible. Now, when we left off, Samuel was around 3 or 4 years old. Remember, his mom made a vow to the Lord, and the vow was, if you give me a son, I will dedicate this son to you, and I'll bring him back to the sanctuary and in our tabernacle, and he will stay here, and he will work, and he will be a servant to the Lord. And that's exactly what she did. When she got done weaning him, and he was not nursing anymore, at the age of about 3, 4 years old, she brings him to the tabernacle and says, Eli, he's yours now. I'll come periodically and check on my son. The Bible says that every year she would come and bring a robe that she had made that was a little bit bigger than the year before. So he's constantly got the robe that he needs. And that's where he was when we left him off. When we pick up in chapter 3, he is probably about 12 years old. Okay? So a lot has happened from where we left off last week until we're starting off this week. And he has been left at the tabernacle under the care of the high priest Eli. Now, when we pick up in chapter 3, we notice something that is troublesome. It says in verse 1, now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. So we learn right off the jump that God is not speaking to people in a regular way. One of the reasons for this is that Eli has allowed his sons, we read this in chapter 2, he has allowed his sons who are priests to be corrupted, and they are corrupting the ministries that they are a part of in the tabernacle. Verse 1 says this, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim, that he could not see. Now, I want to stop there for a minute because I want us to think about this. I don't think this is simply just a statement of his physical eyesight. I don't think this is just Eli's having trouble with his eyesight. I think that's probably true, but that ain't all this is about. Because think about it. God, the word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not frequent, and the high priest's vision had been dimmed. I think one of the reasons why the word of the Lord was rare in those days is because the high priest's vision had been dimmed. The light of his spiritual mind and heart had grown dim. But verse 3 gives us a hint that something is about to happen. Because you read those first couple verses and you're like, well, that's depressing. I mean, Eli, his spiritual sight has dimmed. He's allowed his sons to do all this terrible, corruptible stuff in their service to Yahweh. Word of the Lord is rare. The visions are infrequent. Man, this has been set up to be terrible. But then you have this phrase, again, that I do not think is just simply about the physical candlestick. But it says this in verse 3, but the lamp of God had not yet gone out. Think about it, if you're reading this for the very first time, you come to this place where you're like, well, this is depressing. This is not good. This is bad for Israel. They're making a mess of things. And then you get verse 3. But the lamp of God had not yet burned out. In other words, God is still going to do something. Even though these boys are wicked and Eli has allowed this wickedness to happen and he's lost his spiritual vision, God is going to do something. In his mercy and grace, he is going to give Israel a prophet. And this prophet name is going to be Samuel. Think about this story. A woman who could have no kids, who was barren, who was being made fun of for being barren, made fun of for not being able to have kids, goes to the tabernacle and she prays. And Eli thinks she's drunk. And Eli's like, you need to leave. You need to get, you're not a wholesome woman. And she's like, please don't think me worthless. I am praying to God for a child. God gives her that child, and 3 or 4 years later, she comes back and says, hi, Eli, do you remember me? My name's Hannah. I had the baby I was praying for, and I'm going to give this baby to the service of the Lord. And that is the baby that God is going to raise up to be one of the greatest prophets in the history of Israel. Samuel. This story is all about God calling Samuel to be his voice to the people. Listen carefully to this. God is going to call Samuel to be his voice to the people. God is going to speak to Samuel. Samuel is going to speak those very words to the people of Israel. But before he can become the voice of God, he must learn how to hear and recognize the voice of God. He can't just become the voice of God to the people until he learns how to hear from God, how to recognize God's voice, how to distinguish things in his own mind from the very words of God. This story is all about how God calls him and teaches him how to hear his voice, and how Samuel needs to recognize, discern, understand, and then respond properly. There's only 2 points tonight. This is going to be one of those simple messages with one takeaway about prayer. In verses 3 through 9, we have the Lord calling Samuel. Now, Samuel rarely left the tabernacle. He worked in it. He slept in it. He lived there in the tabernacle. And look at what we read in verse 3. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark was. Now, I don't think he was laying in the room where the ark was. Okay? In the ESV, they put a comma after temple of the Lord. It is not, he was laying in the temple of the Lord where the ark was. It was, he was laying in the temple of the Lord, comma, and the temple of the Lord is where the ark was. And then on one of these nights, where he's asleep after a long, hard day of working and serving Eli and doing whatever Eli had him to do, one of these nights, the Lord called Samuel. Verse 4. The Lord called Samuel. The word called here is used 11 times in verses 4 through 10. What do you think the focus is of this text? The call, the call, the call, the call, the call. It's mentioned 11 times in these 6-7 verses. The Lord calls Samuel. Middle of the night, Samuel is sleeping. He hears his name get called, Samuel. He wakes up. He knows he's heard his name. He goes into where Eli is and he says, Eli, here I am. You called for me. And Eli says, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Go lie down again. So Samuel heads back to his bed, lays back down, falls back asleep. Once again hears Samuel. Hops up, runs back into Eli's room. Eli, here I am. You called for me? I wonder if Eli was like any parent. So my first two kids they wouldn't come down very often. My youngest, on the other hand, she would come downstairs, but she would do the scariest thing ever. She would come downstairs, and often, when she was little, she would just stand by the bed and look at me. And wouldn't even, like as she got older, she would wake me up and say, Dad, whatever, this. But she would just come and she would just stand there. And I would wake up with Eden just laying there looking at me. And those big brown eyes of hers looking down at me. But I wonder if Eli is like most parents. The first time he comes in there, all right, no, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. Eli goes back. Here comes Samuel again. Samuel, son, I did not call you. Please don't come in here and wake me up again. Go to bed and let this old man sleep. Go back to bed. I can imagine him first time, okay, no, I didn't call you. You must be hearing things. Go back to bed. Second time, what are you doing, Samuel? I didn't call you. I'm asleep. I want to go back to sleep. Go to bed. So he leaves. Goes back. Lays back down. Samuel. Up Samuel gets. Runs back into Eli. Eli, here I am. You called me? Samuel, I am not calling you, son. And it took 3 times before Samuel caught on to what was going on. Now, here's the thing. The Bible tells us that Samuel actually had an excuse not to recognize that it was the voice of God. Verse 7 says, now Samuel did not know yet the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. He had never heard God talk to him before. It made sense that he hears his name called and he thinks, well, there's only one person who be calling my name right now. It's Eli. It shouldn't have taken Eli this long to figure it out. Just maybe the eyesight of Eli had begun to grow dim. He didn't recognize what God was doing. But finally, on this third time, it clicked in his mind. And Eli said, if he calls you again, you hear this name, you hear somebody call your name again, I want you to say, speak, Lord, for your servant hears. These verses is the call of Samuel. But how Samuel responds is going to be pivotal for the rest of his life. The way Samuel responds to the word of the Lord is going to change his life forever. So now Samuel's going to answer the call. When Samuel heard his name for the 4th time in verse 10, he obeys Eli and says, speak, for your servant hears. Now, if you're reading this, you should probably notice something. He doesn't actually say what Eli told him to say. What's different? What does Eli tell him to say? And then what does Samuel say? What does Samuel leave out? He leaves out the word Lord. Samuel said, if you hear your name called again, I want you to say, speak, Lord, for your servant hears. He hears his name again, but Samuel does not say, speak, Lord. He just says, speak, your servant hears. The reason why is, look at the beginning of verse 10. And Yahweh came and stood. First 3 times, we're not told Yahweh comes and stands. He just says his name. This time, Yahweh comes and stands in the presence of Samuel. The reason why Samuel doesn't have to say Lord at this point is because the Lord is standing right in front of him. No question who he's talking to. No question who he's dealing with here. Now, we're not told what manifestation this was of Yahweh. We don't know. We're not told how Yahweh manifested himself. Was it just a light of glory? Was it the angel of the Lord? Did a pre-incarnate Christ show up looking like a glorious man in front of him? We're not told. But what we're to take away is Samuel knew exactly who he was dealing with. That's why he didn't have to say Lord. He knew exactly who he was dealing with. And so he says, speak, for your servant hears. This prayer, it's a prayer. Think about it, just a simple prayer. Speak, for your servant hears. My little kid Bible back in the day said, speak, your servant is listening. I love the way that it put that for me as a kid. Speak, your servant's listening. This simple prayer of Samuel says a great deal. But one thing is for certain. Samuel is going to obey whatever the Lord tells him to do. He is going to say whatever the Lord tells him to say. That's what's implied in the prayer, speak, Lord. Your servant's listening. It's not just talking, I'm listening with my ears. He's saying, I'm here at your beck and call. I'm here to do whatever you're telling me to do. Here I am, your servant is listening. By using the word servant, he is saying, I'm here to do whatever you tell me to do. And I'm here to say whatever you tell me to say. Your servant is listening. Verse 19, and Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him. And the Lord did not let any of his words fall to the ground. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean that we are told that God would not let Samuel's words fall to the ground? Samuel had learned the voice of God. He knew when the Lord was speaking. He knew when the Lord was going to call him to speak. He wasn't going to use the voice of God for his own gain or for his own power. He was simply going to honor and obey it. So when God spoke to him and he spoke for God, God was never going to let those words fall to the ground. And then verse 21, I love this. The Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh. This is where the tabernacle is. By the word of the Lord. You know what this tells us? In the grammar, he continuously spoke and revealed himself to Samuel. This narrative that we read is the first time that God calls Samuel out. But from that moment on, God continuously and over and over again spoke to Samuel. And Samuel's response every time, the reason why his words would not fall to the ground, because Samuel's response every time had the same exact reverence and heart. Speak, Lord. Your servant's listening. We only get that said once, but that was his attitude his entire life. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. I love, how many of you have seen The House of David on Amazon? Hey, if you have not seen it, you have got to watch it. House of David on Amazon. It's the story of David. The first part is just up until he kills Goliath. I don't want to, I don't want to spoiler. David kills Goliath. Goliath, he's just a giant man. But I want, listen to me. One of the reasons why I loved it so much was because of Samuel. Now, the guy that plays Samuel is the bad guy from Avatar. You know the bad dude from Avatar, the older man that's jacked? Yeah, the big jack dude. So, I mean, he's not as jacked as he was, but plus he's wearing, robes and stuff, and he doesn't cut his hair, and his hair's super long, his beard's super long, and he's basically just a wizard. He's just a wizard walking around. It's unbelievable. House of David. You gotta see it but I want you to see it partly for Samuel. Samuel would go off, spend time away from his wife, go off, be alone. He would come back and she'd be like, "Did he talk to you?" "Yeah. He spoke to me." And she'd look at him and be like, "Well, where do you got to go next? What do you got to do next?" Off he would go to the next thing God called him to say, the next person God called him to deal with. His whole life was, "Speak, Lord, your servant's listening. Speak, your servant is listening. Speak, your servant is listening." And he's going to do and say whatever God calls him to do or say. What a lesson this is about prayer. So often we come to the Lord, and you know what the first thing we want to do is? Talk. "Lord, I got to tell you all the things going on in my life. I got to tell you all the things that are wrong in my life. I got to tell you all the things I want you to do in my life to make them right. Here's my list, Lord." Talk. And we don't spend enough time in silence before the Lord saying, "Speak. Your servant is listening. Speak. Your servant hears." We must have a willingness to listen to the Lord, not just speak. I like to walk at night. When I try to do this in my life, I do it in two different ways. One, I go outside at nighttime, nobody else is out there, and I walk my neighborhood, and I won't have music playing. Sometimes I might have instrumental music playing, but it'll just be me walking. And I will just say, "Lord, speak to me." And you know what's amazing? How all of a sudden in my mind, certain things pop up that I need to think about, that I need to pray for, that I need to do, that wasn't even on my radar. And God's bringing stuff up. Or I'll lay down. I'll lay down in my office, on my back. I'll lay down at home when everybody else is in bed, and I will lay down, and I will just relax my body, and I will say, "Lord, speak to me. I'm listening." Sometimes a Bible verse will pop in my head. Sometimes a story will pop in my head. Sometimes church members will pop in my head. Sometimes God will tell me there's something that God has told me to do that I have not done yet. Because honestly, I don't want to do it. But I know I'm going to have to. I don't want to, but I know I have to. Because on one of these walks, God, as clear as day, said, "You need to go talk to this person. I haven't seen this person probably in 26 years. I'm supposed to go talk to him." Hey, I wasn't thinking about this person. Prayer can't just be me talking all the time. It has to be me listening. It has to be me quiet. Asking the Lord to lay things upon my heart, to lay things upon my mind. And you know what happens? When you start doing this, it's going to be weird. You're not going to be very good at it. You're going to wonder, okay, is that really from the Lord? Or is that just my crazy mind bringing things up? After a while, you're going to begin to discern, oh, this is the Lord leading me. This is the Lord telling me something. This is the Lord moving in my mind to do this. This isn't just Neil's crazy brain. And you'll get better, and you'll get better, and you'll get better at it. David wrote in Psalm 42:7, you got the verse in front of you. David wrote in Psalm 42:7, deep calls to deep. One of the things that means, he uses the waters as an example of this. of the ocean, the depths of the ocean being turned over. And part of what this means is that the depths of our soul calls out for the depths of our God. And we have to be willing to listen. In the house of David, it's crazy that the timing of all this, but in the house of David, David's mom teaches him how to hear from God. And, David's writing songs, he's playing his harp and his lyre and all this stuff. And she says, no, close your eyes. First she says, deep calls to deep, son. And he just stands there and looks at her. And he goes, I'm not hearing anything, Mom. He's like 4 years old, 5 years old. She says, close your eyes and listen. Deep calls to deep. The more we listen, the more we will hear. So a great principle of prayer tonight. Prayer is not just about us talking. It is about us listening. Hearing from God. Lord, what is it you want me to say, you want me to do, you want me to be? And we live in a culture of, and I'm right there with you guys, of distraction. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter me. So you got to make it happen. Okay? It ain't just going to happen. You got to make it happen.